Tactical Enlightenment. This YouTube channel is dedicated to helping you get better at Bannerlord through the use of field command and tactics. And we're going to continue on with our series here. This series now is dedicated individually towards destroying particular types of units. We've already covered infantry in the previous episode. In this episode, we are going to cover how you counter enemy cavalry. So you can see here both sides have the same quality of troops. But in this case, the Valandians, which are sort of famous for their heavy cav, they have 60% heavy cav units. And we are going to set up an essentially a very sheltered formation here to help us destroy this Valandian heavy cavalry. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the 6th Division. These are going to be skirmishers. I'm going to set up all of my units very particularly in effectively a ring, a concentrated ring formation. One of the keys to defeating cavalry is slowing down their momentum. Well, one of the ways you do that is by having densely packed troops. If your troops are spread out, your enemy cavalry doesn't lose a lot of inertia in between attacks, and this becomes very detrimental to your strategy. So what I'm trying to do also is set up the 8th Corps to be these guys here. These shock troops, right? These two-handed axe-wielding mofos. These guys are savage, and we're going to protect these guys and then use them to attack once the enemy cavalry is vulnerable. I'll have 2 similar archer divisions. The 4th and 5th will both be archers, and they're basically identical. The 2nd is going to be stronger cavalry, right? We'll put our better units here. But for all intents and purposes, you could actually make these 2 cav units identical as well. They could be identical quality, identical units. And then, of course, you see the 7th is horse archers. So the 6th, skirmishers. The 8th is our elite shock troops. You see our skirmishers here. I want these guys to have javelins. And then our 1st infantry is effectively going to hold the center and anchor the center of our formation. I need them to be solid infantry, but I also don't want them to be specialized. I just want it to be your run-of-the-mill infantry with a spear, a shield. Maybe a few of them have some javelins. That's not that important. So giving myself a little bit of space here, I'm going to set up the 2nd and 3rd cavalry wings at angles like this. We're doing this to protect us from cavalry charges. The 1st infantry is going to be in this tight band towards the front. And then the 3rd cav off to the side here, also about 2 men deep. Now, all 3 of these formations are in shield wall. I want these guys holding their shield up, which packs the units tight. And of course, they're also holding shields up to limit the fact of them getting stabbed in the face with the cavalry lance. Directly behind the 1st, I'm positioning the 6th skirmishers, and then archer wings in spread on both formations here. Now, you've heard me say on this channel, if you're a fan of the channel, that static troops are dead. Well, that refers to the artificial intelligence. In this case, the artificial intelligence is attacking us, and we can make a static formation that will readily defeat most Valandian attacks. This series is designed to help people who are perhaps struggling to deal with heavy horse in their campaign. Maybe their next door is the aserai or the Batanians, and hopefully I can help you. The last thing I didn't mention, look at the 8th Corps. The 8th Corps is those elite palace guards. Those guys are tucked in here, and we want them there because they don't have shields, right? We need to protect them. Those are our destroyers and one of the linchpins to this strategy. Now, I haven't actually tried this before. I know that sounds crazy to just come on here and try to show people a strategy that works without actually trying it before, but I've used other kingdoms in similar formations, and I'm confident we can get this to work. The key is the shield wall cav on both sides. The enemy cavalry will not be able to penetrate that with their heavy horse charge. A lot of their guys will get bound up on these cav, and that'll dramatically slow down their momentum, at which point we can shoot them full of arrows, throw javelins in their throat, and then, of course, attack them with this incredibly powerful 8th Corps, these shock troops. Now, I'm also going to use my horse archers. I've thought about 2 different ways of using them. I'll probably vary it. I might attempt this battle 2 or 3 different times. I essentially want to distract the enemy with horse archers. Here, I'm sending them forward and then giving them a feint retreat because I kind of want their formations jumbled up, chasing after this juicy horse archer tranche, right? So my horse archers are now retreating to us, and I'm going to try to use them effectively to slow down and distract a lot of their knights as they come in. You can see a lot of their guys are sort of chasing after them. They're sort of infatuated by these juicy horse archers. Meanwhile, our archers and javelin throwers are already going to work. Now, I'm parking the horse archers right in front here because there's one more barrier that prevents their heavy horse from barreling in. Now, we send this nasty 8th Corps right up to meet the enemy cav and tell them to charge, right? Now all these two-handed wielding motherfuckers are coming into battle. They're hammering people with their battle axe. And the enemy's being shot. They're being attacked on multiple sides. And their infantry is just now reaching our lines. At this stage, I can also use my 2 different cav divisions to attack their archers. Our cav divisions have done their job. They've slowed down the enemy. Now we can send them to counter the enemy archers. Now you see the death span. It's mostly green. Right? You're going to suffer some losses, but look how strong our center held here. Between the skirmishers, the 1st Infantry, and that 8th Corps, the center is just an anchor against the enemy here. Our archers are largely protected, and even though we don't have more archers than the enemy, we are mangling the enemy in the center here. There's just so many troops, the enemy cavalry was simply unable to pass through. Now, I think the next time I try this, I'm actually going to add a wrinkle. I've started to do this the more I've played. I'm going to tell that 8th Corps to hold fire, which seems strange, right? Why would I tell, these shock troops to hold fire? That's because they will throw these little pitiful axes at the enemy, these little tiny throwing axes. I don't want them doing that. I want them wailing away with their 2-handed executioner axes, mowing the enemy down. As you can see, this battle is basically over already. I think their crossbowmen are actually charging. Not quite certain why they're doing that, but it was over already. As long as I don't get killed here at the end. I probably will get killed, actually. We'll see. But this battle's over. The enemy's routing, and that was completely destructive of a very equal, capable Valandian force. We decimated their cavalry charge. And again, their army in this custom battle is over 50%. I believe it was almost 60% cavalry. So they've got a lot of powerful heavy horse. In theory, this should be a very difficult battle. But as you can see, this was a total massacre. We ended up with 70% of our troops still intact. So just to replicate that, I am going to run this a second time. And this time I'm going to add more troops to the enemy to make it harder. To make it a battle, theoretically, that we should lose, and certainly you would lose if you auto-resolved. Alright, so we're back. We're going to give this another shot. As you can see, I've increased the enemy army size to 550 units, so they have even more troops now, and this should give them, at least theoretically, a chance to win this battle, a better chance to win this battle. They have about 12% more troops than us. Again, you see almost 60% heavy cav on the enemy here. And again, we're going to use open territory, which theoretically, again, should favor heavy cavalry. The rest of this is going to be basically deja vu. I'm going to talk it through again, just so in case someone didn't understand part of the first. The 8th and 6th are specialized infantry units. Using these little plus signs, I can effectively specialize these units so that only certain types of infantry are in these units. In the 8th Corps, I want these heavily armored, 2-handed wielding savage motherfuckers. And in the 6th Corps, I want it to be skirmishers. Skirmishers, effectively guys with javelins, and oftentimes they'll have shields, right? So I select shields and javelins for the 6th. The 7th is horse archers. That way I can switch the 4th and 5th to archers. The archer corps are identical. Doesn't really matter. I just want archers in both of those. And the 2nd and 3rd are both cav. Now, I've been changing it so that the 2nd is different than the 3rd. This time I'm going to just keep them identical. Meanwhile, the infantry, just as before, is kind of a mishmash of guys. The key is that they're thick. You don't want to have a long, thin line. You want these lines to be at least 2 men or 2 horses deep. You can see right now my infantry line is a little bit short. We're going to tighten that up. And what happens basically is if your line is 1 man deep, a lot of the cavalry trounces those infantrymen. They barrel through them. The one guy gets decked to the sand. And that enemy heavy horse is now rampaging beyond your lines, right? In this case, in our vulnerable archers. So what you want to do is you want to double up these units. Double up your 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Corps. That's the 1st Infantry and the 2nd and 3rd Cav. Now, the cavalry do a lot better. You could actually single the cavalry in a pinch. But basically, this infantry line that's 1 deep is not going to work as effectively as it will 2 deep, right? 2 or 3 deep. So we're going to shrink this. We'll make it a little tighter. You can use the little green arrows so that they're right next to each other. And one of the keys to this whole strategy is compacting our men, right? One of the ideas that sort of spurred this strategy is the whole idea of a square. If you've used infantry squares before, it's quite effective at repelling enemy cav charges. And of course, historically, that's accurate as well. Infantry units, be them musket-holding, more modern infantry units, or even back in the day, oftentimes they would form a tightly packed mass of squares, usually with pikes and shields. And enemy cav had the most difficult time dealing with this kind of formation. Again, in the center right here, that's the 8th Corps, right? Those are my toughest shock troops, right? They don't have shields, so they're behind guys who do have shields. They're also part of the men press, though. I want them part of what slows down the enemy horse. You can see they've got almost 50 more units than us. And again, I'm going to use my 7th Corps. This is the horse archers sort of creatively. In this instance, I'm actually going to dismount them so that their horses are there and form them in a little tiny distractionary square, sort of right in front of our formation. So they're out there right now shooting some arrows, you know, sort of teasing the enemy, sort of tempting them to do stuff. But I'm going to pull them in, put them into a square, and dismount them right in front of the enemy, right in front of our lines here. Meanwhile, the strategy is very similar. As soon as the enemy attacks, once their momentum is killed, we will counterattack with our skirmishers and heavy units here, the 8th Corps. The archers do their own thing. You don't have to do a damn thing to them. All right, so horse archers off their horse and then into a square. And what you have is you have a big wall of cavalry that slows down the enemy impact. You can see almost no enemy heavy cav charged our center. A couple guys did, and they got shot off their horses. They're sort of trickling in now, but these guys are going slow, just fast enough to get killed by our shock troops. So we send in the 8th Corps, and these fucking foaming at the mouth, two-handed motherfuckers, charge. This time we told them to hold fire. That way they tucked away their little axes. They can save those for show and tell. And in they go, foaming at the mouth, beheading everything in sight. Meanwhile, our archers, of course, largely protected back here by this ring of troops, just shooting away, killing everything in sight, massacring everything in sight. I'm actually going to pull my 8th Corps back, just because their infantry looks like it's tucked in there. I might as well just wait for it to come to us. The enemy's surrounding our little tiny square there. There's a bunch of guys that are going to get medals in this battle. You can see there's 18 troops left there. Now we'll charge. We'll charge with the 1st, 6th, 3rd. I think I sent the 2nd and the 8th Corps. They all go roaring. The enemy's totally fucked because they're infatuated with that square. And our archers are back here largely unimpeded, just shooting the shit out of the enemy. In fact, again, just like the first battle, we'll do a little flanking action with the archers here, spread them out a little bit. That way we can approach the enemy archers with sort of a wider degree of archer fire. I can come in and have a little fun, join my men now in the slaughter, and this really was a slaughter. The first battle was, you know, a victory, but this is a massacre. This is that was gruesome. They got some kills in the end there with their infantry block as it came up. In fact, I still see a few of their infantry sort of skirmishing in there, but they got steamrolled here. You know, and I can hear the people who watch my channel, right? You know, wait a minute, you said static troops are dead troops. I don't mean against the AI. Unfortunately, we still have artificial imbecility instead of artificial intelligence. The enemy heavy cav will charge you directly, right? They won't come off the angle or come behind or something like that. They do dipshittery type things in Bannerlord. And if you know that, then you can take advantage of that. So if you're struggling, hey, this is their little noble lady, guard lady or whatever. We're gonna fight hand to hand. But if you're struggling with enemy cav, there's nothing wrong with this approach, right? There's no rules as long as you're not like blatantly cheating, and obviously we're not. This is just an ass whipping we've handed out. We've used tactics, we've used concentrated attacks, using the correct units, you know, for the battle, and the result is an overwhelming victory for us. Again, very similar to the first battle. This actually felt like a bigger massacre than the first battle. But again, we have about 70% of our troops surviving. Actually, it is a bigger massacre than the first one because in the first battle, the enemy had the same amount of troops. I think just a few more troops than us. In this battle, they had almost 50 more troops, and we still completely annihilated their group. So hopefully this is helpful for people out there struggling with heavy cav, whether you're playing against Valandia. This would still be fairly effective against Khazate, although that's a whole separate video. In fact, I have custom battle videos that help people deal with Khazate and their horse archers. But hopefully these videos are helpful, whether you're the intermediate player or even someone who's somewhat new and are trying to finally overwhelm the enemy with battlefield tactics. I strongly recommend you watch more of our custom battles. And I'm pretty sure you'll start experiencing success once you do so. So thanks for watching, friends. I enjoy making these videos on Bannerlord. I've got a long line of teachers. Ironically, I've got a long line of teachers and military in my family, so maybe I'm perfectly suited to be a teacher at the military. I really enjoy it. Please comment if you enjoyed this or have questions. Please subscribe if you want to see more. Likes, comments, all that stuff are beneficial for the channel. I appreciate you guys. I will see you guys on next time.